Welcome to Bona Fide Dialogues. So nice to see you again. And today we will be talking about the very important subject. It's intersection of artificial intelligence and privacy.
Thanks so much for having me.
In a world that's always racing forward, sometimes we need to slow down and reconnect.
Connect genuinely, broaden your perspective, and share your passion.
Bona fide dialogues, where authenticity, creativity, and passion merge.
And I would like to start with this very important problem, which is known as black box. I don't know if you would like to explain what does it mean and why it is so important for us to understand it from privacy perspective.
Yeah, this is a very big problem, and it's been with us for a very long time with a lot of technology issues and with the collection of personal data. And the gist of it is that uh, there's very little that the average person knows and understands about what is going on behind the scenes with technology, especially with the collection and use of their personal data. What data is being collected, how it's being used, what are the implications and risks of that collection and use. And this is very important because it very when we make decisions about whether to use a technology, whether to share our personal information, we are really making a risk calculation. We're really trying to figure out, what are the benefits, which are pretty clear. They're pretty easy to discern. Cool, neat things that technology does. It makes our lives more convenient. It makes things fun. It's entertaining. It's useful. Then we want to weigh it against the risks. Like, how could this harm us? What could be the downstream negative consequences for it? And this is very difficult if we really don't know what those risks are or have the information necessary to try to assess those risks. And this is the problem that is increasingly occurring when it comes to new technologies. And the problem is really exacerbated by AI. And I think that for a very long time, one of the big pushes in privacy law, one of the big things that the folks creating privacy laws, policymakers focused on was, let's create transparency. Let's require companies to post privacy notices and describe these practices. So transparency and trying to fix the black box problem was, I think, a big focus of the law. The challenge that AI brings is that it is so complicated that these kinds of disclosures really are meaninless. They cannot be understood. The implications and risks can't be understood and are very hard to fully explain. And so this then makes the solution of transparency really, really inadequate for the problems that we're facing. And there was always problems when it came to this approach because the approach of, oh, let's just dump all these details in a privacy notice that nobody reads. No one read it. If people read it, they didn't really understand it. And so there was always dissatisfaction with this approach. But now it's a lot worse because AI really makes it exponentially more complicated to really, for an average person to just understand what's going on, even for an expert to fully understand what is going on.
I really like how you approach this black box problem, looking into bigger picture, that it's not something new, that now when people talk about black box, they refer specifically to AI. But what you are saying, look back, we had this problem, it's existed for many, many years. But now with AI, this issue becomes more and more complex because even people who work on this specific technology don't know how decision is made. They see input, they see output. That black box in the middle becomes so complex, especially for large neural networks. They don't know the logic. why this decision, why do we have this output based on this input data. So this is a very important issue, and I personally believe that we need to address it one way or another, because from the legal point of view, we want that accountability, we want transparency, but from technical point of view, they will say, we don't know how decision was made. So who will be held liable for decisions that were made in this process, right? So they need to develop some new technology to audit this black box, to make sure that it can be explainable in the natural language to all of us.
Exactly. And I actually think that the challenge with AI is that I'm not sure that's possible. I think you can explain to people, how a large language model works. You can explain, the basics of AI. So, you can say, here's generally how it functions. And you can talk about at the broadest level, like here's some general risks of AI, and here are some general things that you can know about AI. And that is okay, but that doesn't really um, address the person's individual decision about interacting using AI, um, or sharing data and using these technologies. So it just the general, okay, there are these generalized things don't really are not good enough. And the problem, though, with the specifics is that I'm not sure it's possible. So, for example, LLMs are trained on billions of pieces of data, the amount that's fed in, and the implications for the output of that algorithm is what data is inputted. And so you can disclose to people, okay, here's an algorithm and it's going to make a decision. It's going to make a credit decision, or it's going to decide if you're a recidivism risk, and that will
You
affect
will
your
be,
sentence.
maybe it's hiring decision, right?
Hiring decision. So you can explain like, okay, it's going to do these things. And I can say, okay, but what I really want to know is, how it's likely to affect me. And is this functioning properly? Is it biased or is it not? How is it reasoning? How is it, they're simulating reasoning. Um, so for that, I need a few things. One is I need the algorithm. So, okay, maybe you can make them disclose the algorithm. Here's the algorithm. So what am I going to do with that? I'm not an expert computer scientist, so I need to hire a team of expert computer scientists to take a look at the algorithm. Let's say I can do that. I'm incredibly wealthy. I hire this team of programmers, and they look at the algorithm. They tell me, okay, here's how it works, and I learn all this stuff about algorithm, become my own AI expert. So now I'm an AI expert. I learned the algorithm. I still don't know enough. And the reason I don't know enough is I need the training data. What data are they putting into it? Because the algorithm itself is not independent of the training data. The output depends on the data put in. So now I need, okay, show me all the data you put in there. Well, how are they going to do that? So give me billions of pieces of data from all the scrapes they did online. And now I have all that data. What can I get all that data? I mean, isn't that a privacy problem to get all the data? So let's say, and it's continuous.
People have this perception that artificial intelligence tools have all the answers. It's so smart, but I think we need to step back and rethink the situation.
Well, the
Many,
answer is in
many
the data.
people look at the output and they believe it. You have to question everything you see, like
Yeah.
anything else in life. Before you make a decision, before you use some sort of output and information, you have to question it.
Yeah. And the only way to question it is to look at the data being fed into it. So the algorithms don't work magic. They're basically taking a lot of pieces of data and they're analyzing that data and they're using that data to figure out patterns and then, essentially, generate like, the next word in a sentence, essentially, is
Yeah,
what it's doing. It's looking
predict.
at all the
Yeah, pattern
other
prediction.
pieces written and then so you can look at the logic of the algorithm, but that's not going to get you there. You need the data that it's trained on, but it's too much data for an individual to process. You can't really give people that data. So I don't know how you can be transparent about this process other than to say, yeah, the algorithm is going to use a lot of data, but that I still don't know, is the data properly collected? Is the data biased or not? I'm not going to know this.
I
So
think
I can't.
I think the answer is this ISO certifications. Somebody needs to come in and audit your system. And you decided to build a product. You decided it's going to be AI, right? You need to document every step of the way. You need to document where your data is coming from, and here's your privacy issues right away, right? Needs to be addressed. So I think it's somebody needs to come in and audit and certify, and having good internal AI governance processes in place. I think it's the key, because everyone is rushing right now to build faster. We're in this AI race with China. It's like, slow down. We're not saying don't do it. You should do it, but do it the right way. Document, make sure everything you're doing internally is you have good processes in place. And this is maybe how you address transparency. Transparency not only in that algorithm, you're right, nobody can understand that, even developers, but transparency in the process, in your AI governance process, right?
So I totally agree with your proposal that a way forward is to use auditors because I think the law puts way too much onus on individuals to figure this out for themselves. And individuals are just not equipped with the expertise or the time or the resources to be able to do this kind of analysis. So I think absolutely we need to put this into auditors. But there's dangers there that the auditors could be very weak if companies are allowed to choose their own auditor. The auditors will then compete for how superficial their audit is going to be. I think it's also essential that the auditors uh, are well educated about the effects of AI on all corners of society and on all stakeholders in society. Because if the auditors systematically are uh, just blinded to different groups in society or different people in society or different issues, they're going to miss those in the audit. So I think it's very important that the auditing be done right, because I've seen a lot of times where auditing could be rather superficial, just a kind of a rubber stamp or a kind of hollow blessing for companies. But then they don't really get at the hard questions. They don't really look very deeply. It's not a very probing audit, or it's not a complete audit, and a lot of issues and problems get undiscovered and unaddressed. So it's very important that if the auditing is there, it be done right, it be done rigorously, it be done where the auditors have sufficient power to audit without being unduly
Influenced.
influenced by the companies they're auditing. So I think that's really important if we're going to have a system like that, that be done. And I'm totally in agreement also that we need good AI governance in companies. And I applaud companies that try to do AI governance, but there's a lesson that can be learned from privacy. And privacy governance has been implemented in companies, and some companies have done it well, but there are a lot of companies that have done it somewhat superficially. They've done it in a checkbox fashion. They haven't given adequate resources to privacy. They've just produced documents. They've done privacy impact assessments that are hollow, that are not very good. Then we have other companies that have taken it seriously, except they kind of stop when the stakes get really high. So with AI, it's kind of creating these tensions where AI raises some concerns with privacy or ethics, and you have a governance program, but the AI is worth so much to the company. There's so much worry that they have to run this race super fast, as you said, that they're competing. and that there's a kind of existential crisis mode that a lot of companies have. Like if they don't keep up with AI, they're going to be finished. Even big companies feel this way. And so that puts a lot of pressure on the internal governance to maybe cut corners or be weakened or maybe just be ignored or overruled, like, that they're slowing the company down. They're inconvenient, whereas before they were okay, but when the stakes get really high. And so
That's the
one,
culture. That's the culture that every company needs to build, and it starts from the top. You look at this big name companies and they're making terrible mistakes, and you look at who works in their legal departments, the best of the best, the best of the best. So I'm sure, more than sure, that they were advised to do the right thing. The decision they made wasn't the right decision.
AI makes it really hard because it raises the stakes to a level that is so high, the money is so great. And so companies are not really built to be ethical. They're built to make a profit. That's what they're structured to do. That's what they're incentivized to do. In times where the profit making and the basic functions of a company are in good order. We're not in a crisis mode. There are some companies that can kind of adopt the kind of thoughtful governance approach and the culture that you want. That it does start to break down when AI creates such an existential, the money stakes are just so high, and it takes even good companies can fall by the wayside here because it's seen as like, oh my gosh, if we don't compete with AI, this company might be done for in a few years. That changes everything. Now, all of a sudden, why should we go slow? All the good things in the culture get perverted by the crazy stakes that are existing in AI. So that's why I think we need something more than just hoping that we get good corporate cultures. We need the law to provide a very powerful incentive to companies to say, you need to get this culture. You need to do this responsibly, and if you don't, the consequences are going to be so grave that I think, well, both carrots and sticks. There are good things for following it and bad things if you don't. That the incentives have to be strong enough to counteract the high stakes of the AI game. And if they're not strong enough, they're not going to do it because a company is going to generally act in its self-interest, and its self-interest is to survive and to make a profit. And if it thinks that this is an existential issue involving trillions of dollars, it's very hard to just tell the company, please just continue on as you're normally continuing on.
Yeah, and now we're getting into this liability issues and regulations. And I know that you have a strong opinion and you wrote an article on this subject. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I wrote an article called Artificial Intelligence and Privacy, which I published earlier this year. And the article talks about how should we really understand the privacy issues that are raised by AI. And I think that what makes it complicated is that these issues are both old and new. AI is actually a rebrand of technologies that are pretty old. And it's actually a little bit of a false label for the technologies because what we typically thought of as AI is sentient robots, like a robot that can think, a robot that is autonomous, a robot that acts like a person. So that's what we kind of thought of AI. That's what we see in all the sci-fi movies. What AI actually is a set of older technologies that are now starting to work well. They hadn't worked well for a very long time, but now there's enough data and enough computing power to make them start work well. And these are technologies that are actually not artificial and they're not intelligent. They're neither. They are basically algorithms, which we've had for a very long time, that uh, look at massive quantities of data, and then they use that data to look for patterns and to, an LLM is basically a model that, tries to, figure out what the next word in a sentence should be based on massive quantities of data. And other AI work similarly, but they're not thinking, they're not reasoning, they're not learning, they are being trained on data. Uh, but we kind of give them like human-like qualities, but I think we have to be very careful not to anthropomorphize these technologies because they don't work that way. So that you kind of have these old technologies, but this new power that they have, and they are affecting privacy in ways that we already have a lot of privacy law to address. The problem that we have is that the existing laws are flawed, and they've been flawed in how they deal with privacy already. They have not solved the privacy problem. And AI basically is threatening, and is currently doing, it's making these problems a lot worse. All the fears and concerns that people had with privacy 20, 30 years ago are now really happening in a greater degree and a greater magnitude than before. And certainly changes in degree can turn into changes in kind. And that's what AI is doing. Uh, and I, just as a quick aside, I started writing about this issue 25 years ago. And I could almost take and I could go and find old articles and my first book, which was called The Digital Person. I wrote it in 2004, so more than 20 years ago. And I could almost search and replace the terms and just search and replace terms that I used and put AI in there. And the book would read as if it were written yesterday. Um, so I think what we hear often with AI is, well, AI is all new and we need brand new laws and we need new everything. And I think, well, we need to first learn why the existing laws, which should be dealing with this issue, are failing. Before we go on to try to write new laws and screw those up, maybe we should look at the why the past laws didn't work. There's a lot
So wise of you to say this. Yeah.
And fix those laws. And so I think that's where I would start. I would start with let's fix the existing laws because they will address a lot of the privacy issues here. And then we can kind of, so it's a great opportunity that AI is presenting. It's making it very clear why the old laws fail. But what we need now is to go and fix those laws, not just rush off and somehow cook up some new law for AI generally. Because I actually think there's only a limited amount we can do with AI generally. I think AI is kind of like the early days of the law of the internet. And in those early days, when the internet was starting to become commercialized in the mid 90s, there was a debate like, should we have like separate internet laws and a whole separate set of everything? And some people said, yeah, it's all new. Others said, at the end of the day, if the internet takes off, it's going to be everywhere. Everything is going to involve the internet. And so it doesn't make sense to have a kind of separate siloed realm. All the different areas that it affects are going to have to absorb it. Speech law is going to address it, and jurisdiction and privacy and copyright are all going to have to grapple with AI. You're not going to just, with the internet, let's say.
Yeah.
Now today, we're having the same issue with AI. And the fact is that the copyright issues are different than privacy issues, which are different than safety issues, which are different than job displacement issues, which are different than all the different issues that AI might bring. And so I don't think there's this silver bullet that you can just pass in a law that just addresses all those
all AI issues. Yeah.
laws for the privacy issues. And we need to think about how AI affects those. We need to go back and think about how AI affects copyright and IP. And so I think that's what the law needs to do is first start with how do existing laws ingest AI and deal with AI? And then we can look at, okay, where are the gaps? Where should new laws come into place? But like, let's not forget that first really important step. Let's look at the existing laws where they're failing and improve the problems and move on, thinking that somehow like AI can be solved with one swoop of the legislative pen.
I think it's very important to discuss this because, we're in this AI race with China, and it seems like from political point of view, they don't want to regulate AI. They're concerned that we can lose AI race. We're winning it now, and they want to have a set of federal laws, not state laws. So we hear a lot about this issue, but I think you just made a very important point that we already have so many laws that regulate and applicable to AI.
Yeah, I'd love to respond to something that you said because it's very relevant today, and we're at a moment where everybody is mentioning the AI race, that we're in this race with China, a race with other countries for AI. And it's true, there definitely is this concern that, everyone's trying to develop AI as fast as they can. And that has given rise to some arguments that I see made constantly, which is that regulation stifles innovation, and that if we want to compete in the race, we need very weak regulation or none at all. And so right now, before Congress is the proposed ban on,
10 years. Yeah.
and I think it's really troubling. I think it's an incredibly troubling view, and it's based on a myth. And this myth is that regulation stifles innovation. That you can't have innovative AI. You can't win the AI race if we hold companies responsible. If we have strong regulation, and I think that's false. And I think because if you believe the myth, I think that really makes it incredibly hard, almost impossible, to have effective regulation of AI. That myth is what stands in the way of that regulation, and the companies and evangelists for AI keep trotting out this myth because it's worked historically. And I think when we look actually back at history, the same types of arguments were made constantly, heard constantly from companies like, oh, we can't do this. And if
Yeah.
you do this, it's going to kill us. So the car industry said, we can't make safer cars. People don't want safer cars. We can't have seatbelts. We can't have airbags. It's going to be too costly. No one's going to buy the cars and we're going to go out of business. And guess what? No, in fact, people like it. We can't have more fuel efficient cars. No, it's impossible. It's impossible to have these types of cars. We do. And time and again, the food manufacturer, oh, we can't have safe food. If we have regulation of food, we won't be able to come up with, the industry will collapse. It's good that we have safe food. Oh, we can't make drugs. We can't innovate and make new medicines if there are regulation. We can. Time and again, industry has pushed this regulation stifles innovation myth. And time and again, history has shown that this myth is false. What they really are saying is, that we want to innovate in a certain way. We only care about profit and just want to do whatever the hell we want to do, even if it harms people, even if it causes all these social problems. We don't, but there's another way to innovate. And a seatbelt is an innovation. An airbag is an innovation. Safety is an innovation. So there are, fuel efficient cars are an innovation. It's innovative to come up with ways that technology can actually help improve society, help not harm people, and be responsible. That is an innovation. It's just an innovation that companies don't want to do because it's someone telling them, hey, why don't you do things a different way? Because we as a society and other people are harmed, and we think, you should focus on this and innovate here. And they said, no, we don't want to do it because it's faster and cheaper and easier just to innovate the way we want to do it and make a big profit and, let everybody suffer the harms. Because if we don't have to internalize our own harms, that's cheap, right? And we can just cause the harms and other people pay the bills. Well, I think the law is to say no. We're going to make you innovate, and you're going to make safe, responsible technologies. And you know what?
Find that balance, right?
Yeah, if history is our guide, those technologies do pretty darn well at the end of the day. And companies are really good at responding to incentives. If you tell them, ultimately, one thing, I have this cartoon where I kind of have on like tech companies on
I
one.
love your cartoons. Yeah.
Yeah. And I wish I could show it, but basically, it's on one side, it's tech companies, and it has Darth Vader, and Darth Vader says, "I'm all powerful, I can do anything." And on that side, you ask a tech company, "Can you solve any problem? Can you solve problems? Can your AI do stuff?" Every company is going to say, "Yes, our AI can do everything," right? They're going to go into like advertising mode, tout it, like, "Yes,
Yeah.
we're a tech company. We solve problems. We do the impossible." And then you ask them, like, can you follow, have the other side, like, Yoda telling Luke to, follow regulations, you will. And Luke says, "Oh, it's impossible. I can't do it." But I think, like, what happened to the can-do attitude? Why don't tech companies say, "Yeah, you gave us a problem, and that challenge is, how do we make safer AI? Well, guess what? We'll figure it out because we're a tech company and we solve problems. That's what we do, right? Our AI can do anything. It can be safe." And I think that's, the law needs to tell and create the right incentives to innovate in the right way. So it's not about stopping innovation. It's about steering innovation to make it more responsible. And I think if we do that, we get better technology, we still have innovation, and tech companies are more responsible because we've created the right incentives for them. What they really are asking for when they say, "Oh, don't regulate us. Oh, trust us," it's never worked. And it leads to them just being very irresponsible and to ultimately bad results. And I think, unfortunately, we're like Charlie Brown in the football. Policymakers keep falling for it over and over again. They Lucy with the football, every time Charlie Brown goes to kick it, she pulls it away. And like the companies keep saying, "Oh yeah, we're going to stop innovating. We're going to lose the AI race. China's just going to crush us." Well, maybe not.
Yeah, I think it's your expertise is so important right now because privacy and AI are connected, strongly connected. So for any AI tool to work well, and we all want those tools, right? Um, in every industry, in the medical field, it's going to bring a lot of good, in warfare, we need to have the best AI technology, but you need access to data. And this is where you come in with your expertise, and I think that's what uh, everyone finds challenging right now because they need all this data as much as possible, and they're grabbing all this data. And this is the main problem, I think, that needs to be addressed by privacy professionals and policymakers to make sure that we can create those tools, that we can win this AI race, but at the same time, we don't want to violate privacy of our citizens, especially when it comes to sensitive personal information.
The irony is actually China has showed us that, they rolled out an AI that operated on much less data. So the interesting thing is we're all about like the tech, "Oh my gosh, we got to compete with China, so we have to get all this data." And the irony is China, well, actually our innovation is we don't have to get all the data. We're actually doing this with less data. So that's why, if the law told companies, "Hey, guess what? Do this without trying to getting all this data," maybe it would be possible. And maybe the companies would innovate in ways that would be better and would be even more competitive. You can't just break all the laws. I think that's what companies are doing right now, is that they're scraping everything off the internet, breaking all these privacy laws. They're breaking all these copyright laws. It's not clear that what they're doing is consistent with intellectual property law. And then there's all
And
this.
government is saying, we'll give you 5 years in California, we'll give you 10 years in the federal level, do it, then we will deal with it later. It's like it's
What they want. They think
strange
like
to see what's happening right now.
they think it's okay because the stakes are so high, we'll just break all the laws. And then it's better to ask for forgiveness than to ask for permission. I think that kind of ethos of the tech industry, that ethos is a really bad one. And I think that leads to tremendous problems and a lot of the social problems that we have today. A lot of the negative effects of technology are due to this ethos of let's just do it, let's try it,
And
let's,
deal with it later. Yeah.
whatever consequences happen, we'll apologize later on. But as a result,
Yeah. Pay
we
the
are, you know,
fines, but we'll make more money.
Yeah, and they're sitting on a world that is stewing in disinformation, a society that is more, divided than ever, violence that is getting worse and worse, public discourse, getting worse and worse, the political sphere kind of breaking down. We see, deep fakes and all sorts of problems with children, suffering a lot, people being harmed, people committing suicide, all sorts of social problems with technology. And I think technology does a lot of great things, but
Yeah.
we're also seeing a lot of harmful things that are happening. And we kind of, just we're not really addressing those or dealing with those very well. And I think, causing irreparable harm to society, to the world for a whole generations to come. I think, without, with this ethos of let's just experiment on everybody, throw it out there, rush it out, the consequences be damned, and then they'll basically try to either ask for forgiveness or try to escape the consequences. With technology, it's never going to be fully safe to roll out. That's the problem. It does change. It does evolve. And we're in this difficult spot where it's never fully safe to roll out. We never fully know what the risks are going to be.
But this
It is,
time, I think it's even worse because we wanted to discuss agentic AI when they make decisions. And keep in mind that black box, right? We don't know how it makes decision, but now it's not just makes decision, but it takes action. Who will be responsible for that action? Deployer, or it will be developer who is responsible for the action, and what are the consequences of those actions. And like you said, every technology has some risk, especially new technology. And if agentic AI not just make a decision but actually takes action on your behalf, and if something goes wrong, there are a lot of questions about liability.
yeah. And I think it's generally, if we look, historically, unfortunately, what happens is, we have very big, powerful companies making a lot of money, who have generally been able to shift the law responsible. And so, if we follow the path that has, existed, that's probably what's going to happen. And then eventually, society wakes up after years of terrible consequences or really bad things. There's eventually a wake up. But it's always slow, and look at what's happening with climate change. Finally waking up, like, hey, maybe it's not good to pump all this carbon into the environment. Let's do something, and we're struggling, and we may run out of time, and destroy the whole planet. But hey, people made some profits, and we got out there.
We can destroy the planet much faster. I think we need regulations when it comes to high risk environments.
Exactly. And I think, good regulation. The challenge is that we're in a legislative environment that is really struggling in the United States, especially where, at least at the federal level, we've never seen such dysfunction that we see now. We really don't see, attempts to let's come together in good faith and figure out a solution to common problems. It's all about, how can we, one up each other? No one wants to cooperate. Hardly anything passes. We don't have a lot of respect for expertise or, any kind of, like, let's do this smartly. Let's do this the right way. Let's really try to solve a problem that affects everybody. It should be a bipartisan issue. But unfortunately, we just don't have the people in policymaking who are kind of right for a moment right now. And so we kind of have the wrong people for the time that we're in, which is unfortunate. I'd love, I think there are ways that we really could come to good laws that would make a difference. But I'm just not confident that we have the people in power and politics who are the people who are going to get that job done, unfortunately. And I'm not, that's why I'm a little, I feel like my role is just to say, if we had people who really would be able to thoughtfully make policy like adults, sit down and really just focus on the policies and not just scoring cheap points or doing dumb things, and would respect expertise. So when something's more complicated than what they can understand, they bring in people and they listen to everybody in society and come to a solution. That's not our process. Our process is just a lot of hotheads who spout out stuff, and they don't know what they're talking about, and they don't respect any expertise, and you get, and they basically are being, bought off by the big companies. So it's unfortunate because I feel like at that level we're not going to get the kind of thoughtful policy making that we need. And right now, the whole idea of this AI ban, it is so monumentally stupid, so ill thought out. Not just a general idea, but just also stupid. And how do you even implement it? What exactly is AI? We haven't figured that AI is many different things. So how they define AI is going to
Yeah,
be
there's
very
so many
complicated.
definitions. You're right. You're right.
How does that affect all the state laws? So what laws are enforceable and what aren't enforceable? Are torts enforceable? Are contracts enforceable? How does it work with general laws like general tort law, negligence, or other areas of law? Did AI get exempt from that? What about contract law? Does AI get exempt from contract law? Can AI companies contract? An AI ban, a ban like the one they're proposing in Congress, is the kind of thing that, like, if a person walks into a law school, and it's the kind of thing like someone who doesn't know anything about the law might try to propose. Oh yeah, just ban it. Like, just ban, no regulation. And if you know something about the law, you realize, like, it doesn't work like that. It's not so easy just to
Just
do something.
bring on professionals, like you said, experts, and create this plan, strategy, AI policy strategy, and figure it out. Because right now, like, let's just deal with it later. This is not how you solve the problem.
Exactly. And that's the thing, they don't even want to come up with a solution. It's just like, let's just do some stupid thing with the ban. But that's already even worse. It's like, it's one thing if they actually created their own law that would address these problems and then say,
That would
okay,
be great, yeah.
the
But
other,
still, sometimes, yeah, you need
yeah,
some regulations on the state level.
yeah. I think it just shows that they're just not serious people at the federal level, and so they're just not serious um, about this. It's
Isn't
like
it a good idea to have it regulated on the federal level for consistency? Or how do you see it? What would be the best scenario?
I would say yes and no. I think there is good to have, but I think some of the inconsistency is overblown. I think that, we have with privacy. Well, we heard this with data breach. Oh no, the sky is falling. All the companies are running around like Chicken Little, like, 10, 20 years ago. All the states are going to have their own different data breach laws, and we can't function. Oh my gosh, it'll be impossible. And guess what? We don't have a federal law, and we have 50 different state laws, and guess what? The sky isn't falling. Yeah, it's annoying. It's a hassle, but it works. And no one, and weird, like, people aren't freaking out over it. There aren't like calls like, if we don't have a federal data breach law, we're all going to go out of business. And in the early days, you had this, like, oh my gosh, it's like urgent, red alarm, sky's falling, and then you have it with privacy. Oh my gosh, if we have all these different state privacy laws, we won't be able to do business. We'll go out of business. It's impossible. We have them, and guess what? Yeah, it's a headache for sure, but they're not going out of business, and that's because the laws don't ask a lot of them. And at the end of the day, the laws are pretty weak. and they're not really changing that much how they do business. They're still collecting lots of data and they're still doing lots of things. They're still making lots of money. And it's not like suddenly like all the tech companies have gone out of business because we have 20 different state laws. They're still okay. So a lot of times I feel like, I listen to them and I treat them like children having a tantrum because I think like a lot of the rhetoric is just so overblown. It's like, oh my gosh, it's the end of the world. It's not. It's just a headache. It's not like they're spending like ridiculous sums of money on privacy. They barely spend a dime. Privacy teams are way under-resourced. They are not given they're given a pittance compared to security, for example, and a very tiny percentage of what the overall revenue of a company is goes to privacy. So I would just say that, oh, we're spending millions of dollars. Yeah, well, you're making billions in profit. So privacy is like not even 1% of your budget. So I think like a lot of this stuff with the, oh my gosh, we need a uniform federal standard is a little overblown. I generally think the best approach is good ideas can come out of the states. And so I think that you don't want to shut that down because
Mhm.
it's an engine for a lot of the best ideas, really effective things from laws have come from, different states, from different approaches being tried. So I would recommend having the federal law be a floor, which basically means that you can't, that's the minimum. So a state can't have less protection. But if a state says, we want to try something else, we want to do a little bit more protection, we will do it. And if you have a good federal law, and that creates an incentive to have a strong law because if the law is strong, you're not going to have this problem. And we have this with old privacy laws. HIPAA, for example, the rules that regulate health privacy. The regulations are pretty good and they don't preempt state law. So states can enact stronger protections. A few states have enacted a few things, but not much. And a lot of the laws, the health laws that states are passing, are areas where HIPAA doesn't cover. So it's not even like saying we think HIPAA is bad so much as we think HIPAA should we think more should be protected.
Mhm.
So basically, it's
Seems like
interesting.
it's the best approach.
And we've had it for, HIPAA's,
To have the
decades
federal.
old. And we don't have all this, like, where are the people saying, oh my gosh, we're going to go out of business. We can't function because it doesn't preempt it.
Mhm.
No one's, because we have a good rule. A few states have a little bit more, and generally it works. And that's the thing
So
what
why
I think.
can't we do the same thing with AI right now?
Exactly. But the reason why is that companies don't want that because they know that if you have a law without preemption and then you create a really weak, crappy federal law, that's what they want. If they realize, and then they realize like, but if they have like a strong federal law, um, you don't need preemption because why would a state waste its time passing a law if you already have a good
Yeah.
one at the federal level? It's redundant. It's not necessary. But that's why I think preemption's a bad thing. Why I think uh, you want states to be able to pass more because that creates an incentive at the federal level to have strong protections. Because if they're not strong, then states are going to step in and pass the law. So make it strong. But that's exactly the kind of incentive the companies don't want. They don't want a strong federal law. They really don't want much of anything. They want an easy law that's going to be where they have to spend no money and put no resources and make no changes to their business. They want something really simple that they can just uh, create some documents and throw them into a drawer, do nothing different, and just keep on doing what they're doing. At the end of the day, I don't think the laws are working that well. They're not really doing much. We've seen, okay, it's not like companies like, oh, now we have to stop collecting all data. We can't do advertising anymore. We can't make money anymore. We're all going to go out of business. Google, Facebook, Google, Meta, X, all of them just go out of business. We're all over. We're dead. We can't do business anymore. No, they're doing business. They do business in the EU. They do business all around the world. They do business everywhere in the United States, in the States. And they're doing just fine and they're making record profits, collecting record amounts of data, doing all sorts of things with AI. They're just keep on trucking and they're whining about the regulation, And then they're going and crying like, oh, the regulation's killing us. I don't think so. Uh, they seem to be doing, better than fine right now. So,
Yes.
why don't we look to their profitability and look to how well they're doing to see, maybe it's not the end of their world that we have all this. Like maybe we should believe them a little less.
I wanted to ask you about your children's book about privacy.
Yeah, so
Maybe next time we meet, we can talk about children's privacy. That would be
yeah,
a good topic.
absolutely. Yeah, so briefly, the book was something I wrote about 5 years ago, published it in 2020. It's called The Eyemonger, and it's a rhyming story for children. I would say 7 to 11 in age, and it basically is about why privacy is important. And the goal of the book was to try to make it timeless, and that I didn't want it to talk about a specific technology of a particular time. So it's really about just why privacy matters, why we should care about privacy. And it involves this guy with 103 eyes who comes to say, hey, I want to spy on everyone to keep everyone safe and secure. And people elect him to run the country. And then we'll see what happens from that. And I won't give the book away, but that's the
Yeah.
story of him.
Is it available on Amazon where our listeners can buy it?
Yeah, it's
On your
actually
website?
on Amazon. You can do a search for it. There's a hard copy and then there's a version for the Kindle. I think the hard copy is better. I always like a children's book in a
Of
physical
course.
copy.
I agree.
And there's also a video I made of my reading the book with some of the visuals from the book. It's on YouTube. So you can do it in any of those, and the video is free. But the book itself you can get on Amazon. I hope I designed it because there really weren't many books that introduced children to the concept of privacy, to what privacy is and why privacy matters, how to think about it, how to discuss it. I also really tried to make it so that it wasn't
Too educational.
yeah, it's entertaining, and also I wanted
Entertaining.
to be the character, the eyemonger, the guy with all the eyes. I didn't want to make him evil. Actually well-meaning, but he just gets carried away. And I wanted kids to realize that, a lot of the threats to privacy and a lot of the concerns that we have, it's not like good and evil. It's not like, Darth Vader versus, the good guys, but it's complicated. We make decisions all the time to surrender privacy. I don't think the people who are collecting our data are evil, but they're self-interested. They have a particular view, and there are some harms that can be created in the process, and we need to sort that out. So the book
Some of
really
it can be avoided. Yeah, wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for this dialogue. Very helpful. I think it's a lot to think about for all of us.